On this episode of With Love, the Chambers.
On Friday, July 4th, Nolan traveled with friends by boat to Horn Island, which is a barrier island off the coast of Mississippi, the Gulf there. And at some point during the afternoon, the group became separated. Friends later returned to the mainland without Nolan. And Nolan was reporting missing after he failed to return. There was a search July 4th through the 6th that was conducted by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Coast Guard, Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, United Cajun Navy, and other volunteers searching for him. And then on Sunday, July 6th, search crews located Nolan's body near the northwest end of Horn Island, and his identity was later confirmed.
You know, this case, for whatever reason, it has went viral. And I think sometimes when our people in our community are seeking justice, we want things to go viral, but that puts a very heavy toll on a family. And I don't know if we often talk about that enough. Because again, they have been thrust into the throes of mass media and social media immediately, without their choosing.
Welcome to With Love, the Chambers.
Where life, laughter, and lasting lessons meet.
We're the Chambers, a husband and wife navigating faith, family, and everything in between.
Here we share real stories, heartfelt conversations, and a whole lot of love. Because life isn't perfect, but God's grace sure is.
So pull up a seat, grab a cup of coffee, or go ahead and sip that tea, and join us for honest talks, laughs, and the wisdom we're learning along the way. This is With Love, the Chambers.
If you've been enjoying the stories, the laughs, and those deep life lessons, we invite you to support the show and help us keep the love flowing. Head over to www.coff.ee/withlovethechambers. Think of it like buying us a cup of coffee or two. As always, thank you for hanging with us. Now back to the show.
Welcome to this week's episode of With Love, the Chambers. I am Jamila Chambers here with the vision engineer Rufus, and as always, every single week, we are so thrilled and so excited and really appreciate you tuning in, you listening, you checking in with us. Full disclosure, family, before we get into today's conversation, we are going to have a family discussion. Every now and again on this podcast, there are things that happen in current events. There are things that are happening in real time that really just arrest Rufus and I, that make it hard for us to move beyond. And the death of Nolan Xavier Wells is one of those moments, family, where we said we can't go back to programming as usual. We always like to talk about leadership and family and marriage and all these wonderful things. But when we have something like this happens really to one of our sons, not our literal son, but the son of our community, it does create a moment for us to pause. And so I'm going to recap a little bit of information before we get into the discussion to just set the table for us. And then I'm going to bring Rufus into the conversation. He's sitting right here standing by, but I'm going to bring him into the conversation so we can really, really get into talking about the things that are on our hearts concerning this young man. But Nolan Xavier Wells was an 18-year-old from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a recent graduate of Ocean Springs High School, and had aspirations to play football at Southwest Mississippi Community College. His friends, family, coaches, everyone that knew him and loved him described him as someone respectful, someone that was well liked, and certainly had those aspirations to play that D1 football. On Friday, July 4th, Nolan traveled with friends by boat to Horn Island, which is a barrier island off the coast of Mississippi, the Gulf there. And at some point during the afternoon, the group became separated. Friends later returned to the mainland without Nolan. and Nolan was reporting missing after he failed to return. There was a search July 4th through the 6th that was conducted by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Coast Guard, Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, United Cajun Navy, and other volunteers searching for him. And then on Sunday, July 6th, search crews located Nolan's body near the northwest end of Horn Island, and his identity was later confirmed. As of right now, us recording this particular episode, this investigation remains active and no official cause of death has yet been released. Authorities initially indicated they suspected drowning, and they have also stated that currently there's no confirmed evidence of foul play, while emphasizing that the investigation is ongoing. Like Nolan's family, we have questions. Our hearts are heavy. There's so many mixed emotions around this moment. But I want to first and foremost say that beyond our thoughts and prayers being with Nolan's family, as a community, we are standing with the Wells family and standing with them as they navigate through this really, really unspeakable moment for them. Rufus, it's hard to say weigh in with your thoughts, but boy, this was a heavy week for us and we haven't even gotten started with the conversation. I want you to jump in though with your just initial thoughts and reactions as we get into today's conversation.
Yeah, obviously just a very unfortunate and tragic sequence of events. And I think, my initial thoughts when I saw the headlines were thinking of the parents, thinking and empathizing of what they must be feeling. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I'll say unfortunately or fortunately, my heart further went out to them because the mourning and the grieving that they're doing is being lived out in the public media. So you can't just close your door and mourn. You have to present yourself before the judicial system and the mass media, mm-hmm. As people of dignity and class. And that's not easy, when you're mourning and when you're grieving. And, this case, for whatever reason, it has went viral. And I think sometimes when our people in our community are seeking justice, mm-hmm. we want things to go viral, but that puts a very heavy toll on a family. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we often talk about that enough. Because again, they have been thrust into the throes of mass media and social media immediately, yes, without their choosing. So again, that's really where my heart posture has been, thinking about this father and this mother, that obviously love their son. Yes. And, they were in a season of dreaming and preparing for the future. I heard one story saying that, the young man was preparing for tryouts. Yes. He was a football player, and yes, I believe he had a tryout or a workout with the community college.
That following week,
yes. And he was preparing, and, they were talking, I think, at least about, hey, don't party too hard, mm-hmm. over the holiday weekend, because mm-hmm. you got to go handle business the following week. So I can imagine that excitement mm-hmm. being replaced with fear of not knowing where your son is, and then that fear being replaced with dread and absolute grief when, the nightmare was validated. So, and social media is crazy. Mm-hmm. I think we all fell in love with social media a number of years back, but now I feel like social media is just out of control, because people are just saying all kinds of things. And, half truths or untruths can be ran with and just monetized and sensationalized. And there is obviously an investigation that's happening. The family has retained, Benjamin Crump, and they're getting financial support, by some established people just to make sure that the actual truth can be established and memorialized.
Yes.
But social media is just on fire right now about this young man and his passing and the details around his passing. And, I think another thing I'll say, and then I'll kick it over to you, but, we live in a day and age where, this whole concept of fake news, it was branded, a number of years ago by a current president in his maybe first run for office. I think that's probably when I first heard fake news, is when he was running. I guess that would have been, the 2015, 2016 cycle, maybe something like that. Whenever that was.
It's been a decade though now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, I think we heard fake news initially. It was like, oh, that's a fun term. And, that means that you can just call anything you don't agree with fake news. But now that concept is now, a preteen, and almost every news cycle, every story, you have to see, okay, is this real? Is it not real? And I think, to be honest, when a lot of people saw that young man who is African American surrounded with those Caucasian boys, they immediately, pulled up the historical Rolodex and say, oh, we're going to go ahead and play this card because what history has taught us is X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And, that information has not been validated per se, but that just created a tsunami. It created a tsunami, and now we're wading through the tsunami of this young man's tragic passing while investigations are happening, and there are just so many narratives that have been made already. You know what I mean? And now you got to deal with that. And, unfortunately, one of the mothers of one of the boys who did make it back from the island without incident is a judge in that district, and preemptively issued a statement that just seemed a little bit out of context and out of bounds and out of place of sorts for somebody in the judicial system to make a statement as if to start the PR campaign before anything had been established or anything. And, from what, the news cycles say, the boys are lawyered up. So there's a lot of suspicion based on the details of this case and also based on history. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's unfortunate. It's painful. And, it has grabbed the algorithm. So here we are. Here we are. I mean, what are some of your thoughts? And, again, you're a mother. And I feel like, that's, we as followers of Christ, we mourn with those that mourn.
Yes.
So I can't run past the mother and the father.
Amen.
I mean, to gather yourself immediately. I need to get the phone. I need to get the car keys. I'm getting pushback from these parents, but I gotta get the belongings. I need somebody to find my son. And a couple days later, you're on Good Morning America. And you're not going on Mourning America to fall apart. Mm-hmm. You gotta present yourself with some dignity and grace for the sake of the memory of your son. And that's a lot. You know what I mean? That's a lot. And I can imagine as you know, mom and dad, I can imagine, and I don't know these people, but, you know, I've just seen snippets. You know, when that camera comes on, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing a whole race of people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I would just like to commend and, you know, appreciate and intercede, you know, for them, because I can only imagine, you know, Jamila, we're obviously parents of two amazing daughters, and yeah, our daughters, they, you know, go places. Sure. And they're of age. Sure. You know,
Same age,
we have an 18-year-old, and, you know, they get out a little bit, and, you know, when they get out, you know, you're praying, and, you know, they know how to make sound decisions and this, that, and the other. But again, I just can't imagine, you know, being in their shoes. And that's really where my focus is for this discussion, is them. Mm-hmm. You know, the judicial system is going to do what they do. Mm-hmm. The Benjamin Crumps of the world, they're going to do what they do. And I appreciate people that have made it their personal business to stand with families who are in a tragic situation. Social media is going to do what they do. Politicians, they're going to do what they do. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some of them begin to emerge. But at the end of the day, a mother and a father lost their baby, you know. So, but, you know, for you, I mean, what is, and again, you wanted to have this conversation, you know what I mean? Yeah. So what is the most pressing thing, you know, for you about this? And again, we got listeners that are listening, right? They may have tuned in to say what they're going to say. Like, what is the critical thing on your heart and mind about this?
Sure. It was so many critical things. And thank you for sharing that part of the big thing that I always want to make sure that we do. Whether in this platform, in this podcast space, or any other space that we find ourselves, is just always be committed to being ourselves. Yeah. And one of the reasons I was so burdened, again, to have this conversation was feeling such a deep level of, beyond empathy, I feel like I'm at a loss of words for that connection that is felt, because it is the connection parent to parent. Mm-hmm. It is the connection generation to generation. It is the connection to history. Yeah. It is the connection to what's going on in our nation. And at this time, it's like you can't divorce yourself from any of these components. And it just felt wrong to my core to have a conversation about anything else without stopping to acknowledge that this young man lost his life a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So that was the main pause. Yeah. You have so adequately described one of those points of connection, which was making this point of connection with these parents. Yes. They have an 18-year-old that was going out with friends, July 4th weekend. Yeah. Make sure you party, because you got to take care of something, you know, in this case, football. And in our case, with our girls, we would have said something for school or something for the theater or whatever. And we have had those same conversations So that was part of it. The other part of it, and you tapped on it, which is why this is such a visceral feeling in my body, such a visceral feeling in so many other people, especially Black Americans' bodies, is because it has taken so many of our bodies to experience our bodies being lost in this justice system has appeared differently throughout the course of time. So you talked about this very complicated relationship with the media.
Very, very
Parents are going in front of the media and utilizing the media to help solicit the public to evoke justice, because I can't count on the system independently to give me justice. That was the same decision Mamie Till made when she said, no, take the photographs and keep the casket open, because I need to make sure that my son's story is told.
Well, some people may not know that reference.
And then the references to Emmett Till's lynching. And I don't know the year. You can look up the year. Rufus is so good at pulling up these dates while I'm talking. I don't know the year, but Mamie Till is Emmett Till's mother, who, very similar to Nolan Wells' mother, made a petition and a plea to the public and said there will be justice. And my son's name is going to continue to go forth, and I'm going to utilize the media to make sure that that happens, because that was a large component with bringing the outrage to the nation about the lynching of Emmett Till in particular, because there have been hundreds of thousands, now let me say hundreds and thousands, hundreds of thousands of Black people, Black men in particular, lynched in this nation. But we speak Emmett Till's name so very clearly because of that media attention and the wherewithal of that mother in the midst of her grief to say, this story will not be covered up, will not be swept under the rug, etc. And as much pain as we see in the eyes of these parents, it's very clear. And I think in the right ways, they are making sure that their son's story from the very beginning is told and is out there.
Yes.
We wanted to be careful in this conversation because the investigation is ongoing and we're just consuming information like many of you through different media outlets, etc., that we didn't want to perpetuate anything that has not been verified or has not been publicly confirmed. So we didn't want to get into that discussion. But what we can say, and what has been clear, is that this family is making this appeal to make sure that everything concerning the events leading up to their son's death that weekend have been thoroughly investigated, and they are not trusting the system independently in Mississippi to do that. And it being in the state of Mississippi, which historically, again, has this history, especially around Black bodies, of not bringing justice to the forefront. So that's one part of the conversation, and one of the things that I wanted to have that discussion around. The other thing, and there's so many layered conversations, but the other thing, particularly concerning race, is this difference in conversation about where Black folks are safe. Are Black people, specifically, are Black people safe when they are the only in the family, in the community, in the friend group, in the place? Are Black bodies safe when they are the only? This is a conversation, like it or not, that has been brought back to the forefront because of the passing of young brother Nolan. And it's a painful conversation and another painful reality. And another layer of conversation that Black folks are having one of those, what do the kids say? The call is coming from inside the house. Like one of these conversations we need to have inside the house yet again about how we are to move, navigate, and negotiate ourselves in public spaces. I recently visited the Civil Rights Museum. I was at a conference in Memphis and recently visited the Civil Rights Museum, and I shared this comment with my colleagues at the end of that discussion. Visited the museum, was at a conference with several colleagues. Most of them are Caucasian folks, and they're from all over the nations and from communities that don't look like my community in South Los Angeles and that sort of thing. And I shared with them the level of calculation I had between walking from the Civil Rights Museum back to our hotel in terms of saying, what type of conversation do I need to have? Because I am one of the few in the room. Many Black folks, brown folks will identify with this being the few, being one of the only. Even if you are the person in with a title and position of authority, how that means something different when you are one of the only or few in the space. And so finding ourselves as a Black community in that conversation again with where are we safe? Where can we make sure that when we are out and about, that we are around people, whether they look like us or not, that have our best interest at heart? How can we discern that when we are out and about? How do we know that people won't, and I'm going to say this, and it's meant to be an ouch to folks that are listening, that are some of our white friends and some of our white colleagues. It is meant to be an ouch. I have to say this preemptively. How do we know that you aren't going to retreat into your whiteness when things get tough, or there's a comment or a conversation? And what I mean by retreat into whiteness, there comes a time, and just ask your Black or brown friend, there will come a time in conversation with even trusted white folks and people that love us and we love them back, that there will be a line, and it's fine, and it's so hard to identify, and you hardly know when it's coming, especially when people that are close to you, where there will be a moment in that relationship where people may opt to retreat into, you better know your place. You have said something that has crossed the line. You have, who do you think you are? And it's very hard. It can be very, very funny. It could be people that it's happened to me with people I've known for years, people I have broken bread with, people that I've worked with, people that have been around my kids and watched my kids grow up, and vice versa, and all of these things. And this is not an indictment, because this is not an indicator of the relationship I have with all white folk, quote unquote, in my life. But there have been times when people I thought even I could trust got to that moment in that fine line and, quote unquote, retreated into their whiteness, meaning making me feel othered, making it clear that there is a power differential. Even if there wasn't a power differential, I have people that have reported to me, pull out that power differential, like, you better not dare go there. And that is something that I don't think I articulate very often publicly, and not sure that I've articulated very often at all. But that's the conversation that we're having now. And that just, it doesn't feel good. And in the midst of everything also going on in our nation and politically with what's happening, particularly around civil rights and voting rights and all of these things, like, we can't separate any of that. In that conversation around, where are Black folks safe, and are we safe amongst friends, is a conversation that's to be had. And if you were in the chat, I would love to have some discussion with y'all about this, how that shows up for you and how that fine line shows up for you, and how that conversation about folks that choose to retreat into whiteness, even when they present themselves as allies, and present themselves as friends, and present themselves as someone that's got your back, how that can change on a dime. So that's definitely the things that are kind of top of mind for me in this moment.
You got to know when it's safe to be outside your house, and then you got to know when it's safe to be inside their house. Mm-hmm. And that is a conversation, as you mentioned, safety. And, unfortunately, the United States as a nation mm-hmm. has never dealt with, racial division permanently.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So it always rears its head.
Absolutely.
And we don't know how the boy died. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Did he drown? I don't know. Was he drowned forcibly? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Was he beaten? I don't know. Did he overdose? Somebody slipped him? I don't know. Well, prayerfully that will come out and we'll be able to make a final categorization of this young man's passing. But regardless, it's impossible to look at the data and the facts and not acknowledge the appearance of race.
Sure.
And you and I, Jamila, have traffic spaces where we are the only one.
Absolutely.
And, our discernment or concern is present sometimes not. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And even as you were talking, and I was reminded of the story of the demon-possessed man as recorded in Luke, the 8th chapter. And obviously, there was a man that was manifesting. And for those Bible believers that are familiar with what I'm talking about, this man was manifesting. In other mm-hmm. words, the demonic presence inside of him was causing him to just mm-hmm. do some crazy things. And, people were scared. People are concerned. And when the Lord Jesus got in the presence of this man, mm-hmm. the demons inside of the man began to cry out. And, Jesus expelled the demons. And, the Bible records he, had a whole conversation with them. And mm-hmm. I don't want to get deep into that. But in that passage, Jesus asked, "What is your name?" Mm-hmm. And Jamila, you and I know the power in a name, right? So yes. that you can expel, expunge, exterminate once and for all by name.
Yes.
The United States has never
done that.
Never, ever done
never
that.
Done that.
And unfortunately, the day and age in which we're living in now, because Legion was never dealt with yes. permanently. Well, Legion's little brothers and little sisters then came back, and
we are many.
Yeah,
the we are many. The we is still weing.
They partying right now, and because they're partying right now, some people have been emboldened, mm-hmm. To just act just completely nasty. And I say that, y'all, and I'm not, trying to get too deep for some of our listeners, but as followers of Christ, part of our job is to be able to look at culture through the lens of Scripture.
Yes.
And through the lens of our followership of Christ. So some of the vitriol that we see on social media, in mass media, mm-hmm. even some of the statements that government officials are making are completely dark. You know, and I'll just use that. I'll use that term. You know, we don't want to get thrown off the air. Are just completely dark, right? And we got to have discernment to know, you know, that, and you know, there's work to be done on all fronts.
Yes.
Number one, there's work to be done to keep our community safe, right? When we live in South Los Angeles, you know, there's work to be done to keep people safe, regardless of what ethnicity you are, you know, and it's just so crazy right now, you know, even listening to some of the Caucasians that are Christian nationalists, and, you know, they really want to have, you know, a nation that is really governed and dictated by white male Christendom.
Yep.
Understanding that's a certain brand of Christendom, but it's not the gospel-centered brand of Christendom. They have no acknowledgement that the freedom of religion is part of the founding pillars of this nation. So you can't, that doesn't work through the historicity of the nation. Understanding that part of this nation was established so that there would be a freedom of religion in the United States, especially Jewish people, because of what was happening over there with them, you know, in Europe. So it's so, and I just bring that up to say the insanity is rampant right now. So, you know, as we talk about this precious boy, we have to look at the landscape, because we're not talking about him and his life in a vacuum.
No, right.
We're talking about it in all of this landscape.
Yes.
And if it's found out to be a complete accident, hey, the mother and the father will still mourn. If it's found out to be foul play, a murder, the mother and father will still mourn.
Yes.
And this nation will still have to reckon with its soul, you know. But it's very nuanced. But, you know, I did just want to interject that, you know, about the gospel, because it's we just got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
You know, we got a lot of work to do. And I don't even want to belabor, you know, this conversation, because it is so heavy. And y'all listeners, I wish we had a silver lining.
Yes.
Or we had a solution, or we had a bow. You know, if we was in the church, you know, at the end of the sermon, you got to have a call to action, or you got to have some good news. And yeah, you know, we know the good news is there's freedom, you know, in Christ Jesus. And there's a liberty that is not limited to this earth. You know, it spans beyond a lifeline and a, you know, a birth and a die date, but and all of that. And I'm not even trying to go there right now. But this just, I feel like it deserves some processing.
Yes.
And some discussion. But any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I do want to talk about that. And one of the other parts of this story are the ways in which the community has been stepping up. There's notable folks in the community like a Colin Kaepernick that is paying for an independent autopsy. There is a Tyler Perry that is paying for funeral services. There have been many celebrities, entertainers of note that have made contributions. You mentioned Attorney Benjamin Crump, who is a prominent civil rights attorney, and the Al Sharptons of the world have, you know, brought their legal services to the table. And so many people across this nation and across the world that have, in whatever way, even if it's a like, a share, to help again get this young man's name out there, in whatever way, have contributed towards, as a community, having these discussions and having these conversations, albeit very difficult to have, and very difficult to have publicly. Like I said, because all of these folks, to your good point earlier, are going to do the things that they're going to do. The system is going to do what it's going to do. The people and the politicians and everyone else. But there is a family, and there is a name, and there is a legacy, and there is a healing that this family hasn't even begun to be able to step into. They haven't even buried their son yet. So this is such early days as we're recording this.
And the family should not be pimped out.
No.
That's the other thing. You know what I mean? We got to say it, their grief should not be capitalized on by any faction. And we've seen that happen. You know what I mean? We've seen that happen, and my hope and prayer is that does not happen. Also, and I'll kick it back over to you, Byron Allen, he donated towards the family. He donated a significant amount of money, and Spike Lee, also, he was at the press conference with the family in New York
and donated a significant amount as
well.
Yes, so praise God for them.
But I'll let you.
Praise God for
the
them.
Last thoughts.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, listeners. This is how we would be having the conversation if we weren't recording this, and this is exactly why we're recording this the way that we are. So it is a bit raw. It is not as polished as our typical conversations, but this is not the moment for that. This is the moment for us to show up and fully be ourselves, and to, even if it's a bit messy and a little bit all over the place, to just be present, because that is what the moment requires. It requires us to put our hand in the air, to put our feet to the fire, to show up and to be present in this moment for what is happening in the life of this family, and quite frankly, having a legacy conversation now for the life of this young man, Nolan Wells. So again, with that being said, we're so grateful to everyone in the community, black or brown, any nationality, any nation of origin. So grateful to anyone that is standing with the Wells family and is standing in support of the Wells family, because they're going to need that, and going to need all that support and encouragement as they navigate through the days and the weeks ahead. I want to give us a charge in the interim, which is the charge in the interim is to continue this conversation within our spheres of influence ourselves, no matter what ethnicity or gender we find ourselves in as listeners of this program. There are conversations that we can have amongst each other. Black folks, let's talk and continue to have the conversations amongst ourselves about how we show up for one another, how we support one another, how we make sure that our spaces are safe, how we make sure that we are able to fully be realized, informed individuals, no matter where we find ourselves. And white folks, quite frankly, talk to your mama and them, talk to your cousins, talk to your brothers, your uncles, your sisters, your aunts, and have those conversations. What are you overhearing? What comments are you overhearing when you bring your black friend around, or your black colleagues around, or are in spaces where you might notice someone being the only? Are you leaving certain comments unchecked? Are you contributing to the conversations with your silence? It's not enough anymore to, in your heart, be anti-racist, and it's not good enough to be in the space and say, well, on the inside I'm a good person, but I stand by in silence as I watch some of these things happen in our classrooms. And are you in the teacher's lounge when they're talking about that young man in the class, and you're overhearing the conversation, the way that particular student is being discussed, or that sort of thing? I mean, it's time for all of us to step up and really, in the spaces we find ourselves, make sure that we keep Nolan top of mind, and keep anyone that might be marginalized in a space top of mind, because those are the types of things that happen. And even if a Black person has positional authority, that doesn't mean they are safe in that space. That doesn't mean they're safe in that space. And then if it comes to a point, white colleagues and friends, if it comes to a point where you're feeling uncomfortable and you feel like your back is against the wall, ask the questions, do the work, be uncomfortable, be vulnerable, and resist the urge to retreat into that comfort of whiteness, which we don't like to talk about it out in public, but you know exactly what it is. Oh my goodness, the famous social scientist that used to do the experiments, she's since passed on. Rufus is gonna look her name up. I'm terrible with names, doggone perimenopause, got my memory all over the place. But she would do the social science experiment, and she would ask a group of students, all different ethnicities, how many of you would want to trade places with a Black person? She would ask them. They would say, I don't see color. She would kind of lead up these conversations and kind of do this social experience. No, I don't see color. Oh, no, I treat everyone the same. Oh, no, I see everything the same way. And then you ask the classroom the very next series of questions, which is, how many of you would like to trade places with a Black person? And none of the white students raised their hand. None of the white students raised their hand, because even when we don't admit that we know what that is, we know what those differences are. So much so that the white students in the room said, you know what? I wouldn't want to trade places with any of my Black counterparts and colleagues. And if we're all treated the same, and if that is a truism, which is something that we like to say, because to your point, Rufus, we don't deal with the nitty gritty of it all as a nation. So we like to say all these euphemisms about where we are, but everyone knows I don't want to trade places. And if you don't want to trade places with me, then that means when you're in rooms, in spaces, when I am not there, how are you standing up for people that look like me? And I think those are some of the things when we talked about all those kids that were around when this was happening, all the kids that saw Nolan this weekend, not just the friends he was on the boat with, but it was about 3 dozen or so kids that at least that at some point had a touch point with him over the course of that weekend. Nobody knows nothing. Right. So those are the kinds of things that when we say, here's the charge, or here's the what I can do, Black folks are going to keep doing what we have done in terms of the ways in which we have been fighting this fight for generations in this nation. But to white friends of this show, to white friends that are listening, what you can do is make sure the call ain't coming from inside the house, and particularly from inside your personal house. That's all I was saying.
All right. Well, y'all, we're going to call it a wrap. Thank you for spending actually a little bit more time than what we thought here. This went longer than what we thought. So much to say. And, again, we hope this conversation just gave you an opportunity to listen, to process, to lament, and to consider and reconsider as we move forward in the week and as this tragedy moves forward and the pending investigation. Please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you are on this With Love, the Chambers train with us. I can't believe we are already at episode 66, I believe.
Wow.
And we are going strong, and there is so much more to come from us. Feel free to send us an inbox, a direct message with a topic you may want us to tackle or a guest you would like for us to interview. Thank you all for those who listened to our most recent studio guests, Dr. Latasha and Dr. Matthew Nesbitt was a recent guest, and they gave an amazing discussion on how to navigate marriage, ministry, and purpose. And then, of course, we had Mr. Sherman Dumas with us as well. He has a new book release about the family.
Yes.
And we enjoyed having him in the studio with us. So, hey, feel free to send us some recommendations. We are open, and we will continue to do what we do. But until next time, hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we will see you again real soon. God bless.
This episode of With Love, The Chambers was brought to you by the Vision Engineering Collective, where purpose meets strategy and vision comes to life. If you've been enjoying the stories, the laughs, and those deep life lessons, we invite you to support the show and help us keep the love flowing. Head over to www.cough.ee/withlovethechambers. Think of it like buying us a cup of coffee or two. As always, thank you for hanging with us. We'll see you next time. With Love, The Chambers.
That's a wrap for today's episode of With Love, The Chambers.
We hope you laughed, learned, and felt encouraged along the way.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs a little love and wisdom today.
You can also connect with us online on all social media platforms at Rufus Chambers Online and at Jamila Chambers. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time,
keep living, keep laughing, and keep learning with Love, The Chambers.